The big story making international headlines: former U.S. President Donald Trump has issued a statement calling for the immediate release of documents taken from his home. This follows an FBI search of his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida this week. The U.S. Justice Department has asked the judge to make public the warrant that authorized the search. The request means that the public could soon learn more about what investigators were looking for during that unprecedented search of Trump's home. Let's see if we can get you more on this. Bring in the Daily Maverick's associate editor, Brook Spector, who joins us via our video link this morning. Brooks, always great to get your take on this. Thanks very much indeed for making time. And I wonder what your take on this actually is, by the way, because of just how unprecedented it is. For one, I imagine the questions in many people's minds is, how was Trump allowed to leave the White House with all these documents? And given how much time it's taken to get the documents from him, is the search not a little too late?
Well, good morning. Good to be with you. Yeah, I've been following it with some detail. If you'll recall, back when he left the White House, there was a certain amount of disarray because he was pretty much trying not to leave the White House. And the moving vans showed up right at the end. Everything was packed up and taken away and sent down to Mar-a-Lago in Florida. And none of the normal controls that exist as a president is transferred out of office and a new president is transferred in seem to have been followed in their entirety. And the process, to some degree, depends on good faith. You will turn over all records to the National Archives and Records Agency in accordance with the Presidential Records Act. You will not violate classification laws and rules and regulations and processes, and all those materials will be surrendered to the government and perhaps ultimately to a presidential library if and when there are declassified materials and arrangements are made. And in this case, truckloads of documents went down to Florida. And the government obviously has also been spending a fair amount of time trying to get access to and get back all the documentation that went there. There have been back and forths with delegations of lawyers and calls for this material and then discovery that the material wasn't complete and whole and so forth. I mean, the critical thing to me is that the violation of the Presidential Records Act is one thing. The violation of the Espionage Act is yet another thing, and this is extraordinary, to have top secret sensitive compartmentalized information, the highest classification authority in the government, somehow treated as if it was wedding invitations and responses, is just extraordinary.
Yeah, and that's certainly the sense that some people are getting. I mean, for one, I don't imagine that these are the only copies of these documents, given how important they are. And I certainly hope they don't only exist as hard copies.
Well, the point about the TSCI, top secret sensitive compartmentalized information, is that there really are very few copies of such documents. They're close hold. They're numbered in sequence for the most part, and you don't take them even up to the upstairs quarters of the White House, the living quarters. They're held in the secure spaces within the White House offices, or in some cases, obviously, in the Pentagon or the Department of State or similar facilities, but in all cases, the circumstances of those documents are managed very, very carefully. They're in special, special binders. There's a distinctive coloration to the border of the paper in some cases, and they're numbered in sequence. And to have this stuff just bundled up into the boxes with the other stuff is just... well, the word mind-boggling, I guess, applies here, but everything about the Trump administration was kind of mind-boggling in its own way. So we probably shouldn't be too surprised. We should be appalled and astonished.
I think many people have probably been taken back to that time and don't want to go there, given just how astonishing all of this is. I mean, for one, what would be the implication if it is found that Trump is in violation of the Espionage Act, in a context where, of course, he's no longer in office?
Well, there are a couple of things that come to mind easily. One is that to the extent that such material contains information that was shared carefully by allies with the U.S. or was obtained, shall we say, by virtue of intelligence efforts, it's going to put a damper on the sharing of intelligence with allied nations. That's one thing. The second, to the extent that any of it is allowed to leak out, it produces the kind of documentary reverse engineering to those about whom the information might be in the documentation to figure out the sources and methods by which it was obtained. And then, of course, it provides more information for a foreign nation, not necessarily a friendly one, to be able to work through what it is the U.S. government knows or doesn't know about their own activity. The first one in the listing that was provided as a result of the release of the search warrant is stunningly curious. Information about the French president. My goodness, what was Donald Trump holding on to about the French president that was important enough to take with him to his home in Florida? I mean, the mind boggles on that one too.
Yeah, of course he's hit back. He's had his own statement released late yesterday. Part of what he mentions in that statement is that he had actually declassified these documents before leaving office. We do know that that is actually the prerogative of a sitting president to be able to classify and declassify certain documents. Some legal experts...
Up to a point.
Yeah. In fact, that's where I was going. You know, there was also an emphasis that there has to be a process followed, and it seems he hasn't done that.
No, he hasn't, and especially the TSSCI material, top secret, sensitive, compartmentalized information. It isn't the president's sole prerogative to simply wave a magic wand and say, I hereby say that you are no longer classified. That has to go through a whole chain of clearances, because the person who classifies, or the organization, shall we say, that classifies material gets a say in how it's declassified. The president just doesn't willy-nilly, arbitrarily have the right to just declassify everything. You'll recall right at the beginning of his administration, when he was photographed or videoed in a chat with a Russian ambassador, he was apparently speaking from or holding on to classified material that was very clearly identifiable as having come from another country. And there he was, effectively telling the Russians what it was. This is a man who just didn't follow the rules, didn't even follow the rules that he helped set up, because he, at one point early on in his administration, he also approved the tightening up and the additional punishment for the release of classified material. And here he is now, as the Shakespeareans would say, hoist on his own petard.
Yeah, well, in the context of what we've heard from those hearings around the U.S. Capitol raid, as it were, earlier this year, it's, I guess, much easier to understand how something like this would actually take place. But I guess part of the concern now is this wasn't really just about the document, Brooks, wasn't it? It was also about the information contained in these documents. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is that that information may very well have traveled by now. And so even getting the documents back perhaps may be a futile exercise.
Well, they apparently now have the documents back. But, I mean, it really is a question of fair and equitable treatment for all government employees. I was a U.S. government employee for, 31 years, and I had the authority to classify material. I did not have the authority to take it home and keep it in my television and study room so that I could contemplate it at my leisure at 2 in the morning, let alone carry it in my household effects when I moved from country to country. That was way beyond my authority, as it should be. And if I had been caught, like some people have been over the years, there are punitive sanctions, including fines and jail time. And you put this together with all of the other court proceedings that Donald Trump is or will be subject to, as well as the Internal Revenue Service, the American equivalent to SARS, the evaluation of his correct or incorrect way of filing his taxes, and the way in which he artfully and perhaps fictionally described the value of his properties to convince banks to lend more money, and his phone call to the Georgia State Secretary of State to go out and find him 11,780 votes, you have a fair number of court proceedings that Donald Trump and or his lawyers and family are going to be subject to for a long time to come. And what this should say to us is that justice may be a little dilatory or slow, but it isn't entirely without teeth.
Sure. Interesting times, as always, when it comes to issues around the former president. Thanks for helping us connect the dots. Really do appreciate it.